Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
And Reed is making fun of me because I always ask, this podcast is about with Anthony from the Brynson group, which for the first 4 months of our relationship, I was calling it Brynson or Brynson, or Bryningson or
Brynson.
Yeah.
Basically everything except Brynson. Yeah.
Yeah. I could never get it right. It got to that point where I was second guessing it every time, and I would kind of thought I had it right, but then I would just switch it because I'm like, no, that can't be right if that's what you think it is. But anyways, Anthony had flown out here maybe a month ago at this point. We had spent some really good time with him at NAA, and then he made a trip out to Denver to just spend some time with us to see how else we might be able to work more together. And since he was here, we decided to have him on the podcast in studio, which was our first in studio guest.
Yeah, which seems crazy. I'll still have a hard time believing that, but if you say it's true, it must be true.
Yeah, well, I thought it was crazy. That was Michelle Reinhold, who many folks that listen will know is her first time on the podcast, which also knocked my socks off.
Yeah, she was one of our probably first 10 employees, or between 10 and 15 maybe.
Yeah, somewhere in there. But one of the first folks, I think there's Isabel and then her, I think, on the account management team. But she's
definitely one of our thought leaders, so it is a shock we didn't have
definitely
her on.
Untapped. We could all of a sudden have a whole new set of content for the podcast if we get Michelle on a few times.
Series with Michelle.
Yeah. Well, we talked about when it makes sense to hire a marketer, because the Brynson group does. They kind of act as an outsourced marketing team, or wherever you have any gaps in your marketing team, they fit. So if you're missing a marketing director, they can come in and play that role. Or if you're just missing some of the executioners, they can come in and play that role. Or if you're looking just for consultants, they can come in and say, hey, this looks good. This is something you may want to fix. And in particular, Anthony has a really deep knowledge of ILS spends, how those contracts work, and then how best to just orchestrate your buys with them, like what a good strategy is based on the market and the property. So really fascinating fellow to talk to if you have any questions, even on things that you may think you have covered, like the ILS.
Yep. And you would say that's one of, if not their biggest differentiator. So we have had Janet on, a few times from Cadence Marketing. And I was trying to think after we talked to him, kind of the key differences between the two. Janet's amazing and has built quite a, clientele within Minneapolis. He's more national, right? So that'd be one thing. At least he has plans for that. So I think heavy on the East Coast now, but starting to build West, and then more of a specialty in ILS. Is there anything else? Because you've gotten to spend even more time with them than I have, but that you would think are really big differentiators for Brynson Group?
Yeah, Janet is clearly focused on hyperlocal, like the Minneapolis-St. Paul market, and he and Janet have talked quite a bit. They're super friendly, and they pass a lot of knowledge back and forth. He, like you said, he's more targeting a national presence, and Janet has really good ILS experience as well, but he's really made it a niche for himself. And then, I think Janet also has more creative and brand building experience than where Anthony's at. So Anthony is more, on the a digital buy side of things. In fact, they even have a program that's called digital media management is the way he goes, DMM. But anyways, where he can act as basically your buying arm for you. So if you don't have a marketer to execute the buys, they'll go ahead and start acting as the point person with your vendors of choice. And if you don't have any vendors of choice, they'll go out and get, they'll make their recommendations. And then let's say they pick Digible. If Digible's not doing a good job, they go ahead and give us a kick in the teeth, saying, hey, get it back together. You're not doing a hot job. So anyways, a really interesting fella. I'm excited about what they're doing as a company and the road ahead from them. But anything else that you want to hit on?
Just he's got incredible energy, and you'll definitely feel that on the cast. But I was also super impressed with I guess your favorite maybe core value at Digible's curiosity, and he's loaded with that. So as soon as we started engaging with him and talking about some of the things we've done to build our company, he immediately went out, read that material and then some, and brought it back and was referencing it, I think somewhat on the cast, but during the visit quite a bit, talking about vision of his company now using the same framework we had, as well as several other books. So I just, wanted to, I guess, call that out, give him a little love for that, because not everybody follows through on that kind of stuff. But I think that's going to set him up really well for the next few years.
Yeah, totally. It's almost like our management team better pick it up, because he's going to start to lap them on like how many Jim Collins quotes and EOS quotes he has.
Yeah, I'm even worried.
I know.
And I have a picture of Jim Collins above my bed.
Yeah. Yeah, there are times like I'm on the phone with him and he drops like a Jim Collins quote or an EOS quote or something, and I'm like, my brain almost short circuits, because I'm like, who the hell knows? Oh, that's right, we recommended those books to him. Yeah, he studied. But yeah, anytime I hear like a quote out in the wild from somebody, I'm like, wait a second, did they read the book, or is this just happenstance?
Right.
So, yes. All right. Well, it was a really fun episode. I hope you guys enjoy our conversation with Anthony. Okay. Welcome to the podcast, Anthony. Please introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Anthony Paganucci. I am the founder and CEO of the Brynson Group. We are a marketing consulting firm that specializes in multifamily, where we have consulting on one side and then some digital marketing management on the other, specializing with ILSs.
Cool. And we're also here with Michelle.
Hey guys, this is my first podcast ever.
No way.
Yes.
That's a crime.
Did you know that?
Well, no,
I thought we had her on like 3 times.
No,
I've wonder
never
Nicole felt it was like you coming on, Michelle, and she's confused.
It makes it that much worse because you have a really nice voice too. We have a few here, that could do Disney voiceovers, and
Arden's one.
I don't know if I'm ready to go that far with you yet, but
I'm not. But
no, I think you might be in that sphere. So welcome.
Thanks.
Well,
yeah,
for those that don't know you, what do you do?
What number employee were you?
10.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
first 10.
10. Yeah. Almost 4 years, but I'm a strategic account manager at Digible now. Been here almost 4 years, like I said. So I just work really closely with a lot of our clients, building out strategy, some of our partners, making sure things work well.
Well done. Okay.
I can vouch for that.
When I hear Anthony say Brynson, it's like so easy, but I don't know if you told him.
Was that the correct pronunciation?
It is. Thank you.
I don't know if you told him.
Absolutely.
I've been mispronouncing it for 4 months.
You found 8 different ways to pronounce that, and none of them were right.
But at least you know the back history behind that.
Yeah,
right?
your two niece, nephew.
You're trying to create a family business, and my niece's name is Brynley, and my nephew's name is Brynson. So I took the first half of her name, the last half of his name, combined them to make that, and till this day, I mean, they're 5 and 7. So they have no idea what I'm doing. And they keep saying that that's their name, but it's missing letters. So that's what I was like, yep. So we get a few variants when people are asking how to say it when they say it. But
and so you said Brynley and Brayson?
Brynley and Brayson.
See, those sound like similar to Brynson, meaning like, is this a pattern in your family lineage where you just keep combining?
Right.
Until
we're all
a super original name like Brynson.
Yeah. When my sister married outside of an Italian, so like after that, now we got all these crazy names coming in, other than like Anthony, Michael, Gene, all that normal stuff.
Yeah.
Brynson is a good name though, just for a child also.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Michelle's firstborn.
I'll see if that's on Nicole's list.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're here to talk about when to hire a marketing director, or when you might be able to outsource some of those duties, and then what the implications are. So the pros and cons of both. So, Anthony, we'll kick it off on your side of things. But at what point in time should a property management company, and maybe you need to delineate between third-party owner-operator, when should they bring in someone full-time to handle marketing versus some leasing consultant sort of running shop or some operations?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a loaded question. Obviously, we know, but one train of thought to look at it is, we always need marketing, right? I mean, that's our job, so we're always going to be a little bit biased, right? But we take the road of being more proactive than reactive. Right. And, a lot of times we find that a lot of PMCs, they start going on this frenzy of saying, oh my gosh, we're losing occupancy and we need to go hire someone right away. And they throw tons of money into this and expect immediate changes. And that's where we find the failures. And it's that they throw in, we can throw as much money as you want for that first month, and they're expecting those immediate results. I mean, you guys probably get this. They're like, hey, I'm going to put $5,000 in SEO. Can you fill me up by the end of the month? Doesn't work like that.
Especially with SEO.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh wait, I don't have to put, can I just put a couple $100 on social? Is that great? Like Facebook? Can you try to target my mom? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. We'll do
as long as they see their ads, they're happy.
Yeah. So what it comes down to though is also going to be based on your size and then your tech stack, we have found. And then also the third element is kind of your organizational structure, like your hierarchy. Because if we have some PMCs that they are top down, very much top down. So properties don't make decisions, even regionals don't make decisions. And that can be where you may need an actual direct hire because your day-to-day is going to be much more involved. Right. And that will be more costly when you have an outsourced, consultant or, even like a third party. So that's where we recommend, depending on the organization structure and the culture. Typically, we find a lot of folks are in the middle where they've got like a marketing manager who may be seasoned in the industry, but may not be so seasoned in digital or different types of marketing mediums and like the mix. Because as you guys know, right? So David, I think you gave me the statistic and please correct me. I think over the last couple of years, we had like, I want to say it was like 2,000 digital tech startups and now we're at 10,000.
Yeah. In the last 10 years, we went from like 150 to basically 10,000.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now
and that was just marketing tech, MarTech.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there's all these different solutions and no one is an expert and no one has any idea that 9,976 of them are even out there, So we find that the most success comes from understanding that no one is a true professional in any given department. Right. So we've all read plenty of Jim Collins and I had to throw him in for this podcast.
It's never happened.
Never, I know. That, surround yourself with experts and we want to then say, let's outsource social. Because we don't know rep management. We don't have organic social like we talked about. The postings, like that's usually our first piece of what people ask for is like, can you help us with social media? Because we know we should be on it. And it's like, absolutely. It's the hardest, coming up with new content, rough. And then the other side is, looking at it and saying, well, what are your strengths as an organization? Meaning what tech stacks do you have? Can you actually look at your numbers, make sense of them, and then execute on the expectation, right? So it's, we're like, okay, do you use, and can I say like PMS names on here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you were going to ask about cursing, which is also allowed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my favorite.
There is some sort of cap on that though.
Okay, good. Let me know when I hit the strikes. The little dashes on there. So when you have like a PMS, property management software, like a Yardi or Entrada, that you utilize, obviously you've got more data you can pull. And then when you couple that with a CRM, you can even pull more data. What we find a lot of is that folks don't understand how to digest, comprehend the analytics. So that's where we come into play. And we're like, look, we have a team of, industry experts with decades of experience that can look at this, analyze it, and then tell you where your direction should go based on what your goals are. So is your goal to 99% because you can handle, the couple apartments vacant? Or is your goal to get 100% so you can be ready for sale? So we've got to figure out everyone's goals and what their KPIs are. And then, as far as like someone just for project based, that's where I also think is a great concept of like, hey, I just need to outsource my social and I think we'll be in good shape. Can you teach me a few things? That's the one thing we always, on our team is we always strive for, what is the old saying of like, you can teach a man to fish, but you can't make him eat. What is that one?
You can
get a horse to water. Come on, Texas.
Yeah, I was going to actually make fun of that.
I was going to say, we're from Texas.
I'm
we should know this.
Stop. Go ahead.
That's right. You can lead a horse
really
to water.
Weird.
You can't make him drink. Right, that's it.
You also can't make him eat a fish. So
right.
Yeah.
But so what we found is it's not only, providing the...
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink?
Yeah, that's it.
Right, thank you.
That's what he got.
Oh, that's sorry if you just said that.
Took you a second. It's all right.
I was stuck in my head as you guys were talking. I blacked out the noise. I was like, I know I could get this.
I do that too. Just stop for a minute. But what we do is we also see that it's like, look, we've got you a solution, but now we have to teach you what this means for the future, right? So like we want to show you how to execute on this and learn what these analytics actually do for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at like closing ratios. We look at, because you guys know this, it's not just like lead to tour, it's tour to lease, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of these different marketing mediums are always like, well, I'm going to give you a ton of leads. Well, fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but is it you guys that are turning them over and converting them, I should say? That's a product and personnel issue, right? So
well, it
that's
sounds
when the
like
marketing person.
Yeah, it sounds like there are three key things to triangulate on. One is size of the company. One is, as you're saying, your org structure, and then the last is tech stack. So if we really boil it down, if someone has 3 properties, I'm sure we're going to say, no one here is going to say we should have a dedicated marketer, like a staff member, right? If you have 50, probably. Mm-hmm. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah, unless, you know, I would say yes, but again, it kind of goes down on the structure of the organization. Like if you have your regionals and properties making the decisions mm-hmm. and you have a right tech stack, you mm-hmm. don't necessarily need someone for day to day.
Interesting.
Because it's like you can look at analytics and make a quick decision and, you know, yes, be proactive and have a consultant type or someone that is doing it's more of an analyst. Right, depending on that structure where you have property managers and then regionals making those marketing decisions.
Because that would mean you trust them. Meaning, correct. Maybe that's my problem is lack of trust, but you would have to train them up too. It's like, what does it mean this to do in analytics? And that feels like a heavy lift for 50 property managers and 10 regionals.
Correct. And that's where I guess you're right. Let me kind of back that up is having the understanding of knowing your specific property, right? Yeah. Because when we have these PMCs that have, you know, 50 properties throughout 10 states, it's very difficult to have a single person because you live, let's say, for example, I live in Boston, right? But we've got folks all throughout the US that work with us. And it's like, well, I don't know how my property's doing in Tennessee. Well, I don't either, you know? So how can you make a decision on marketing if you're not even there? So we've got to incorporate your on-site teams and gain those local perspectives, like on hyper-local focus and say, now I'm going to also utilize tech stacks, right? Which is, you know, I'll give you guys the what do you call that? Like a
shout out?
Shout out? Yeah, thanks. Maybe. I was like, I'm trying to figure out what
I thought he was putting a quarter in the jar.
I know, thank you. I was going to put a quarter in. But basically saying like, you know, when you have these tech stacks like you guys where, you know, budgeting tools and you've got, you know, AI programs or AI software, this really helps to streamline things. And then you don't have to have, you know, that on-site manager in local. So that's where it's kind of a little bit harder. Like you said, if you have to trust them, but what's your tech stack look like? And can you actually like live and breathe that property?
Right. It's like if you don't even have, it's like you wouldn't say pick a dedicated marketer over a CRM, for example. Like you would say you need that for them to be successful. I'll go to Michelle real quick. What do you see as far as like, well, I guess, is your job always easier if there's a marketer, or are there times where you feel like, okay, they could do without?
There's definitely times where I think they could do without for sure, but I will say executing on campaigns, gathering everything, it's a lot easier when there's one dedicated person that has access to all of that information and can just give us, especially if we're trying to launch multiple properties at once and then multiple campaigns at once, because then we're not wrangling a lot of different people. We don't have to go straight to the website developer for CMS access or things like that. We can kind of just talk to one marketer to get everything we need launched. And they tend to understand the reporting, analytic pieces. If there is something missing, they understand why the report is missing data. So it's easier in that sense, but I don't think they need it. We've definitely been successful with campaigns and setup without having one direct person. And just being open with saying, okay, no worries, we can meet with this person and get, like I said, we can meet with a website developer, get CMS access and just work directly with them. That also works for us. We can get tags placed. We don't need that one person. And then it's just on us a little bit more of a communication piece with training, making sure they're aware of what's happening, how we're doing things. But when we're working with a consultant, they also act as that person. So then it makes it easier. So for us, it's whether it's a consultant or a marketing person, usually we have the same results.
Yeah, I'm thinking if I'm an owner, I almost don't care that Michelle's job's easier. I care that I'm more effective. So at what point and what kind of effectiveness do you see a marketer add to it, besides just making your life easier? And I'll give one seated answer here, but if you have to educate, to Anthony's point, 50 property managers and 10 regionals, they may all be saying, well, don't we just buy the Diamond Plus package and we're good to go? And so you have to go educate 60 people to get them on board for them to do it. And that can take anywhere from, 3 months to 2 years to get done. If you have one point of contact and they get it in 6 months, let's say a little bit longer than 3 months, at least they can start making decisions before 2 years. So you didn't lose, there's a lot of opportunity cost there. Well, is there anything else?
Well, and I think someone that gets it's going to be able to make a lot more educated decisions on how you're spending your marketing dollars to get your property occupied. So it just increases your ROI and NOI to have someone that's educated versus someone that's just going to buy a diamond package.
And it's not their core responsibility. Right. Like if you're a leasing agent, it's like, I got to lease an apartment and deal with the leaky faucet or the tenant that has a barking dog or whatever.
10 p.m. barking dog tax. What do we do?
How do we
Not sure.
Well, Anthony, what do you, what then, I guess, would you say the tech stack must consist of for a marketer or a consultant to be as effective as possible? And then I guess I didn't get to, which I want to make sure I get in, is the difference between a dedicated marketer versus using a consultancy group.
Okay, I'll start with the first part. So I think, one of the things too that we mentioned earlier is that tech is very important nowadays. Right. And I say nowadays, like we're from like 1920, but, it's one of those things where it is the inevitable, right? We can't use spreadsheets anymore. Because, when I was a little nugget as a leasing consultant many moons ago, we would get a spreadsheet that said plus 20, plus 15, plus 25 for each floor plan. And we would have to just have a sheet called a hot sheet, right?
What is that? What do you mean? Like for
rent increases, right?
Okay.
So then it was like, well, wait a minute, how come you're increasing these prices? Well, we have no vacancy and things like that, so we can do it. But this is all Excel spreadsheet. And then we'd have to handwrite it on a hot list and say, okay, well, we're going to charge this one because it's got a view and it's third floor, $20 more. Whoa, like all this kind of manual labor. So now what we found obviously is that PMSs, so the Yardis and Tradas, et cetera, that would be your base, right? That's also like your, just kind of like your source of truth, if you will. Like I keep having that in my head recently since we're doing Salesforce. And it's like, that's all I keep saying is source of truth for everyone and everything. Like my mom's a source of truth. So
Reed is my source of truth. So.
We say SOT on this podcast.
Ooh, all right. I'm going to use that now. SOT, not SOB. So SOT. So with that source of truth, then comes the CRM. That's when we start getting into realizing what what's happening at the property level, right? Because we understand high level, right? When you've been doing this a long time, you're like, all right, vacancy's low, we should market. Occupancy's high, probably increase some rent. But when you start looking at a CRM, you can see the actions and the sales cycle, if you will, of how your property is running. And that's when it's most important to have that tech of saying, I've got 200 leads coming in this month, of which I'm just going to throw numbers out there, of which 50 of them turned into tours, 10 of them turned into, leases. That sounds like a great month, right? But we have to follow that in order to see what we're trying to target, because could there be an issue? How come we didn't get 20 leads or 20 leases, excuse me? How come we didn't get 30 out of 200, You're like, who are all these people coming and looking at it? So without the understanding of how things are operating, we can't give you advice. We can't tell you what to do. So we could, if someone walks in and is like, oh, you have 2 vacant apartments. Well, what's the first thing they go to? Call one of the ILSs and jump us up to the diamond package across. But wait a minute, you're stuck there for a year. It's like, oh man, well, you didn't need to do all that. You could have just tweaked a few things on your web presence and your online presence, excuse me. That's when you're old, you said web. Things like that. So back to what you were saying of, yes, tech is very important, and it just makes everyone's life easier to understand the cycle of the property and the prospect. When it comes to hiring a direct marketer.
That was a good callback. Sorry, I didn't think you were going to get the second question. Just good retention. Well
man,
done.
I try so hard. I was so nervous in prepping for this because it also, I think I told the guys before we went live, it's like, this is my first podcast. So no pressure at all. No, but going back to when to hire that direct versus consultant type is, there's a lot of factors. As an owner and operator, we understand coming from that side, cost is very important, right? So what is this person actually doing? Do I need them day to day? Right. So am I structuring where they're calling me about, hey, I need an updated resident referral flyer? like if that's the day-to-day that they're going to be receiving, yeah, you need somebody full-time.
Mm-hmm.
You need someone that's going to take care of that and make updates and do your reputation management and respond to your Facebook ads. Like if that's how if everything's in-house, then yes, you need someone that's going to do that. Because as a consultant, what we see is when they hire them is that they've got kind of a tech stack and they have an idea of what marketing should be as like an owner and operator. And they've got like, even if it's one property to 40, but they just need to finesse their mix. Right. And they're like, how can we make sure that we have complete success? That's when a consultant would come in and be like, here, we'll tell you, we'll be the quarterback. Right. So that we just used that the other day. We'll be the quarterback and let you know, like, let's strategize. Now let's execute. That's really what most people are needing nowadays. But we do find some of the privately owned mom and pops portfolios that are getting larger and larger. That's when they're like, hey, we need to convert to that. We're not there yet. So let's hire a full timer. Or do you want to come in for like a year, clean us up and turn us over kind of thing, and then after that we can do, quarterly or something for consulting.
Interesting. Yeah. Come in and like clean up the systems, get process in place, and then bring on someone that maybe is more junior than what your team may be.
And that's what we have a current client that we are doing that with now where, several thousand units and they didn't have like a well greased machine. And so we went in, cleaned it up, redid the systems, got new vendors for stuff, just kind of found some weaknesses and holes in the issues, and said, hey, we've made it a beautiful little machine for you now. We're going to hand it off to a marketing manager versus kind of a director level like we acted as, right? So here's for the manager, and we've got everything in place, and all they have to do is kind of run it, and here's how they should review it. So we also like taught them what to look for, and then we'll be training that person. So that's part of our offering also is like we train that person to let them know how we did it, and then they should be able to run it pretty smoothly.
And I think it goes back to what you were saying about just all the tech out there now. There's just so many different people that are hitting them with solutions for all these problems they probably didn't even know they had. So I think a consultant could come in and show them where you're at right now. This is a great tech stack. This is the PMS I would recommend, the CRM, bots, websites, all that kind of stuff, a digital marketing vendor, anything. And then here's someone that, maybe in a few years you guys could jump to, or kind of like you're saying, build it up for them, give it to them, make sure it works, and then they can hire someone, because there are just so many things out there. I'm sure it's very hard to figure out where to start, especially as you're growing. And a consultant knows that and knows what would work for them specifically.
And that's where consultants come as beneficial. And I'm not trying to get more plugs for myself or anything in our model, but it really is that like they do have a lot more of a vast knowledge of the tech out there, and they can say, you know what? This is actually not a good PMS for you. Like Yardi is not, Yardi's so big, and maybe it's actually Rent Manager or ResPage. And sorry, I don't know if I should be giving everyone some royalties.
Yeah, we send them checks.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me go down RealPage. Let me go down a few other Appfolio, and all the other ones. But it's the same thing of like, what to look at, like teaching them. And we have some that are like, hey, you know what? You got us to a point. Maybe we'll just call you like once a month, kind of like a retainer, right? So it's like, we don't need you full time. We don't want anyone full time because we spent the upfront investment and now we're good. Now we've got AI technologies like Digible, and we're good. So that's kind of like where the tech really comes into play of having that experience, which is why you surround yourself with experts.
That's what I was thinking to both of you guys is it's more about the experience. They've seen a lot of angles, and so they can shortcut. But
I was just going to ask, what's the typical life cycle then of a consultancy, like marketing consultant?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. There's one where they bring you in for like projects, right? And that could be anywhere from like 3 to 6 months. And typically everything takes, in anything in life, everything takes longer than you actually think it's going to. But we found that usually about a year is what people want, because we have to go in, and when we just do a discovery phase, if you will, and learn the systems, we do find a lot of holes or flaws, and we try to fix those to make our life easier in the long run. So it's like clean up, build it, or finesse it, I should say, and then start pulling reports and running, and then let's see how we tweak it after that. Because we found, like if your reporting's wrong, then it does us no good in the future, right? So we've got to fix that. Like, for example, I think I was telling Nicole and David yesterday that when people look at leads, they say, oh, I got 2,000 leads. Well, do you know that half of that is probably dirty data? And they're like, what's dirty data? And I said, well, I know it sounds crazy to say. Dirty data is, okay, well, we got 2,000 leads, but did you know that 75 of those phone calls were from your current residents? 25 were from neighboring properties asking you for your market survey. So you really got only, 100 So it's like, that's where you have to go in and set up those parameters of like, we've got to clean it up as much as possible to get a good picture to know where to go.
Yeah. And then how would you tell an owner to ROI your services?
Ooh, I mean, just because we're so nice. No.
You text until 10:30 about barking
right?
dogs.
We are always available. No, I think, what we would have to look at then, I always like to say, a cost benefit analysis for a consultant, I think, is the time, right? So like, how have we made your lives easier in reducing the amount of time it takes you to pull the data that you need to execute on a decision quickly and then see those results. So if some people are doing Excel spreadsheets, which trust me, we have a lot of large PMCs that are still doing Excel spreadsheets, which I think I actually showed you guys yesterday. Mm-hmm. It's like 1,000,000 miles long. If it takes you a week, you've now lost a week to get all those reports together. Then it takes you a week to make a decision, or review those with your executive team, or those decision makers, I should say. Then it's going to take you another week to execute and find the third party to get it done. Then it's going to take you 4 weeks to see results. So you just literally lost 2 months because you don't have any tech properly, right? So I say, now if you can make that decision, utilizing this information I gave you that we pulled in a matter of minutes or an hour, look how much faster you can look at this. Obviously, yes, occupancy, vacancy, yeah, you can look at those. But I like to just say, like, your processes. Have we streamlined this for you to make it easy? And can you sleep at night knowing that I can pull this in the morning and it'll be done right then and there?
Yeah. So efficiencies at the top, and then performance probably 1B.
Yeah, it depends on everyone's KPIs. They're all different, right? They're like, I just want to have brand management, and I want to have a good social reputation, and I want to have 100% occupancy all the time. Well, maybe there's a little lease loss there. It's probably increased your rents, but no, I shouldn't say that out loud. Inflation's been rough.
But well, and then do you come with suggestions on what to do with that time that you're giving back?
We ask them what the goals are. Like if they're looking to expand and grow and acquire new properties and things like that, they should be worried about operating the business instead of discovering details and data. Like digging is what I say. Like you should be worried about operating your business. Like, we got you all these leads, but they're not converting. Maybe it's a training thing issue now. Maybe we should look at products. Maybe we should look at the people. Like focus on making your organization better while we work on streamlining it and becoming efficient.
Yeah, totally. And then getting back to when you mentioned, I think David said at 3 properties, no, at 50, yes. So doesn't it matter on some, like what type of marketer we're talking about here? Because there's a lot of different, I'll say, species of marketer these days. And how would that potentially change, at 100 versus 50 versus 3? So maybe better, like clear example at 3, what if I had a growth marketer? Might I pull the trigger at 3 properties? Because my goal is to get to 50. Or would I still avoid like hiring a marketer? And a growth marketer could actually have the skill set to execute, as you're saying, or brought up a couple times, some of these campaigns that you often end up outsourcing. So there's just a lot of different versions. And ultimately, where does that lead you if you don't think in those kind of category of marketer? What ultimately does a marketer do? And I know you were getting at this, Michelle, but it is one of my, not dystopian, like, I guess, threads, but in 20 or 30 years, what is a marketer's responsibility as you talk about this kind of wave of technology that's hitting us? Is it chipping away more and more at the day-to-day, or is that never going to be fully replaced? And if that's the case, that all that's left for, the multifamily marketer in 20 years is like still handling flyers, then what is that? I mean, it's not the most, I guess, inspiring, like,
but it's an extremely valid question because everyone asks that, right? So like you guys even know, like you have this AI technology, and it's like, well, we don't want to, David, you said it well, we're like build ourselves out of a job, right? And we kind of are.
I do want to build myself out of a job.
Well, right, yes, you do. But I said this the other day when I did a speaking engagement, and I said, you guys remember the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Okay, the new one where it's like the weird glasses with Johnny Depp.
I don't know if creepy. I accept.
Yes.
Okay, so in that movie, it showed that the dad of Charlie, right? Charlie, it's Charlie, right? Okay, Jesus. Okay, he was working at a plant, and he was the labor, and all of a sudden they replaced him with a robot, right? And it said, oh, he lost his job, and everyone was sad. But then what happened at the end is exactly what's going to happen to us. he had to actually come back and be trained on the robot to make it functional, because the second one thing got switched, it all went to crash, and then they lost all of their production line. So what we are now going to change is and I use that, so you can give me a little clap, because I really had to come with that one for the other day.
Yeah, I like that.
But it works, right? Because
Sorry.
No, I'm kidding. But basically what it is we're not going to be training people how to be the marketer. We're going to train people how to be the analysts and make the decisions and, fix these problems, because all of this AI is spitting out what we need to know. Like, we're following, once we have the tech stack, right? And then now we just need to look how to fix it if there's an issue, and then go in and say, okay, now it's giving me a strategy for the next 6 months. Well, okay, great. But I need to make some tweaks, because I know that, for example, one of our clients is in an upstate New York area. Well, the AIs don't really tell you, let's do some print. You know what? Why don't we throw a resident retention party? Why don't we partner with, I don't know, I haven't really done it yet, but I think you guys do, Move for Hunger, right? So let's do some of this stuff. Let's build our brand differently than tech. So that's where the marketer has to come in and supplement. And once that's the vision I'm talking about for the future. But I think that's kind of how you're thinking about it, right? Am I going the right way?
Yeah,
Did I go off
totally.
a
And how
tangent?
far away are we from that? So that is a very different marketer, though, than I think what we've seen from the last decade in multifamily. A lot of them are formerly leasing agents. Sometimes they come from the outside, but I feel like there's plenty that are more also traditional marketers, meaning that they love creative, they love brand. But what really is critical now is that they do know how to I guess evolve into more of an analyst, somebody that can we often use the cobot I guess phrase that we heard a few years ago at AIM, but just know how to work beside technology and not be intimidated by it. But I'm interested, I guess, see in the next decade how that transition looks. How many of those marketers of today are going to make that pivot, or will we see really a different class, if you will, a different generation of marketers?
I feel like we already see it with clients, though, because I feel like they're starting to hire more digital specific roles at PMCs, especially larger PMCs. So they'll have marketing managers still that handle a lot of the brand awareness, the branding for new properties, the website, the content, but then they have digital marketing specific people to analyze all of the leads. Where are they coming from? What's the percentage offline versus online? Do we need to do more? And then they can bring that information to the marketing manager to say some of the things where it's actually at the property, the brand awareness thing that a tech isn't going to be able to tell you, but also utilizing all the tech for a lot of the online leads that we know are just happening naturally. And I think some of it's already happening with tech that's been developed. How long did marketers used to listen to phone calls to identify that a lot of good quality leads were coming in during lunchtime and their two leasing people were eating lunch, and so they had a lot of missed opportunity. Now tech can tell you that, so you don't have to waste any more time. You can use that time to tell your leasing team, hey, looks like at 11 a.m. on Fridays we get high amounts of lease calls, but that's also our highest missed call time. You guys have to make sure you're there during those times, and you can get that at the drop of a hat right now.
And
sorry, I can't get out of my head now that you guys were talking about flyers earlier, and when
sign spinners too. Don't forget
Sign
about those.
spinners.
Yeah, the best, like that wavy guy.
Sign acrobats.
Anthony showed a recommendation he had to one of his clients yesterday, and the first three things were nothing that Fiona or any of our tech would tell you to do. So one was wait list. Hey, you have 8 people on your wait list. Why don't you go ahead and contact them first? That's something. Man, why? Fiona would instead say spend more money because they wouldn't have thought about the wait list, right?
Or resident rewards, $500 if you
referral.
Yeah.
Yeah, his second thing I think was an email blast to internal residents, and I forget what the third thing was, but maybe that would include the flyer, the email blast plus flyers. So it just makes me think as now we're connected to the big 3 property management systems, we should start pulling some of that data out to look at the wait list and say you shouldn't spend on marketing, just handle this. And obviously the thing with the resident referral, okay, you have 200 residents there. And if we could pull in a CSAT score or something and say well, you have great scores already, so now let's beef up this program. It just definitely seems like some low hanging fruit that wouldn't cost media. So anyways,
and that's always say Fiona's friendly reminders.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
that's a good one. I like that.
I also think there's always going to need to be a human touch because I live in an apartment complex and it's my home. It's where I live. So yes, to the leasing team, to people like us, it's a job, but it's where I live. And there's things that my apartment does every single day that a robot could never do. So for the Rockies games, they'll blow up like balloons and the entire lobby will be covered in red, or not red, purple, white and black balloons. And it just adds a little bit more of like a homey vibe, and someone's always gonna have to be there for it. They set out little snacks next to the coffee machine. I walk in every morning with coffee that I get in my lobby. So there's always little things that someone's gonna have to do, I feel like, especially at apartments, because it is someone's home. You want it to feel homey. You don't want it to feel like it's just this thing that someone owns and is trying to lease up, and that's all they care about.
And that's where we were saying, like, how can you better the organization for retention, right? We all know that it costs way more to get a new resident than it does to retain one, right? So turnover is very expensive. And we all know that traditionally, it used to be at a property, you would have a manager, a property manager, an assistant manager, and 2 to 3, depending if you were like a large property or not. You always had like, that was kind of like your go-to setup. But now we're trying to streamline things because, NOI is important, and, cost is just like, numbers are always important. But then when you look at it and you say, if I can look at technology in a way that will help me get the time to do, which by the way, I'm totally going to come over and like check out your resident event.
We have a great pool. Come hang out.
See? There's no kind of snacks there.
But you can plug the PMC if you want, Michelle.
Yeah, it's a great start property. Absolutely.
All right.
I do. It's a
for
great,
those that
I
might be listening.
And do you have a scent machine in your lobby?
What machine?
The scent, like the scent air that sprays out the smells.
We do. We have a scent.
Like Cinnabon, or
I don't even know. No, it smells like my apartment. Like I will be able to recognize that smell forever, but I can't put a name to it. But
that's where like the human touch, the human element, right? Yep. Like there's black and white. Numbers don't lie.
No,
Lucy.
Like, when you have that touch,
I know that
it is so much better.
Or even like with my dog Duke. I mean, he's everything to me, and there's dog treats everywhere. It's such a dog friendly complex. But even just the people that work there, like they stop to say hi to him. They remember his name. The security guard sits there and waits for him every night to give him a pet. It's just little things like that no robot will ever be able to do that. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, now we got a break. Reed, I'm curious to hear your thought about a full-time marketer versus not. Like if you were to own, let's say, 20 properties. I say this because people know Digible has over 50 employees now, and we still don't have a marketer. So, and I could see the challenge as an operator, because in most, like in Denver, let's say you had 25 properties in Denver. There's so low vacancy rates because there's nowhere to move. It's like, how much do you really need to invest in a marketer versus, or even a marketing firm? So I'm just saying, since Reed, you going through this now.
Yeah, I think so much of it, as Anthony was saying, is what are the needs, of a company? I'm saying that more broadly, but, or a property. For us, it feels like a lot of it's just, I've said many times, I'm exhausted with our marketing meeting, like the by committee approach. And so that's what's kind of sped up, I think, our focus on finding a marketer here at Digible. But it's not really about growth to an extent. It's organizing all this content and thought leadership that we put together. And so that's what's really been the business case for us. It's not one that I think we're going to look at and say, here was the baseline a year later, how does the enterprise look? But if I were in the situation of owning a property, I would be way more focused on that. Where were we before we hired you? And then, did we establish the right KPIs? And then ultimately, how did you perform against that? So it usually boils down to efficiency and performance, which is what you talked about. But it's not always easy as we talk about all this tech that's entering the space. It creates a lot more variables that make it harder to actually baseline, normalize the picture, and really with confidence say, this was the before and after. And I've said that many times with some of the other founder CEOs that we've had come on from adjacent tech. And my favorite, I guess, example is Everett from Aminify. And so, that company's taking off, and it's really just, kind of an outsourced option, if you will, but bringing amenities, especially like dog walking, food, and all that stuff to the property, for a subscription model. And I think it's brilliant, and it's going really well for him, but I still pushed him hard on how do you set expectations? How do you ROI that out? Because there's so many other things that you're doing. Because he mentioned resident retention, as you were talking about earlier, is one of the KPIs that he offers up when he talks to owners. And it's like, well, how do you clear out all that other stuff
Right.
that is also
Focus.
telling them that is going to save them time or is going to, improve resident retention. So, but ultimately you were asking me when, or
Yeah, well, and
like,
I'm curious, why would you think of a property different than Digible? I'm saying like
I don't
properties in
think of it
Denver.
dramatically differently, but
Okay.
it's hard to deny, like, what we are and what a property is. I mean, there's definitely some lines there. We're not like supply and demand, like a finite, as we talk, infinite and finite.
But isn't that almost the point? Because it's finite, don't you need less of a marketer than Digible that could be infinite in growth?
But I think it's different because for a
But
property,
there's churn. You're
Yeah.
never gonna maintain 100%.
Digible has churn.
Well, you're
I'm
talking
saying,
about
like,
people.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that there's no, well, no,
Oh, you're
well, I mean,
talking
client
about
churn,
our
it doesn't
revenue.
matter. Yeah, I'm just saying if
Yeah.
you were comparing, so I'm saying I could, from the outside, knowing not much about either, well, obviously I know stuff about either, but I'm just saying if your argument is like a marketer, a finite building number of beds, why do you need a marketer? Because right now you could just open a building in Denver and it's going to fill up. And Digible has unlimited potential when it comes to growth versus a building because there's no finite number of beds.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I feel like, and some of it is size, but that's why I was saying the type of marketer would be a big part of my decision process, like where I was at as a company, because I don't know if you'd call it a marketer, but I think we're talking about marketer as quarterback, like kind of, what was it, the glue gun that Jeremy had said, for all this different stuff. But if I could get my hands on somebody, and I know maybe you're right about opening a building and seeing that just, lease itself here in Denver, but there's still a lot of examples where that doesn't happen or it takes a lot longer than it should. And if you had a really good growth marketer that came in and understood digital, like demand generation and all that kind of stuff, then I would be more likely to pull the trigger sooner. But if you gave me a marketer that really had a core competency of creative and brand and project management, I would wait a lot longer to put that person on my team.
If I flip it back, I would, and I sort of destroy my own argument. I would say it's more about, I think, Anthony, you were saying about rent increases. So one, like if you get more leads and there's more looks, don't you have a chance of getting like higher rent? Obviously lower concessions even on that point. The other one, I would make is like it's more of peace of mind. Like we had hired Better Up like 2 years ago for our own like internal coaching because we didn't have an internal coach, and that was just peace of mind for me to know that people were getting some sort of like coaching and personal growth while they were here. And so it's almost like the insurance policy. It's like marketing is such a small line item on the GL of a property. I wouldn't, if the property's not going well, like not leasing fast enough or not hitting revenue targets, I wouldn't want to question like, shoot, is it marketing? Because to Anthony's point earlier, it could be operations. And by just at least having someone own it, it starts to eliminate some of my questions there versus having nobody own it. And then it's like, now who fell down because we didn't do X, Y,
I would argue that because right now we get a lot from marketers that it's very easy for owners to blame marketing for low occupancy.
It's always going to be.
We're the low hanging fruit.
It's always easier to blame someone. So your marketing director, your marketing manager, versus just saying, crap, it's not a good product in this market or something like that.
And that's where when you have one of those experts, there's a lot of crossover with marketing, right? So like operations and training and strategy, because like they always need to be at the decision-making table, always, right? And a lot of owners and operators, that the first thing to cut when they've filled up is marketing. Like, that's cool. But what they don't understand, and what we continue to say is like what I said earlier, it goes back to like minute 2.6 earlier. It's a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. And what you do is you ultimately spend, and I'm even going to say I've seen it, some of our clients, it's like 5x more than you should have because you lost vacancy and now you're scared and you're trying to fill up, and it's like you just wasted time because everyone has to go and like figure it out. But if you had that, let's just say that person that was kind of dedicated to reviewing everything, then they could tell you, you know what, why is it that, I don't know why I'm saying this, but like Susie Q came in and she wanted to rent an apartment, but we had nothing available, but there's 2 vacants. Wait a minute. You just want me to get leads, but you can't give her an apartment because you haven't turned it over. So now you're blaming me for not leasing or renting up because our team didn't turn it over fast enough. So you start looking at your systems and you're saying, well, what is the turnover time? And then you look at it and it's like, well, people don't also think too, like Reed, to your point a little a few moments ago about brand management, right? So it's like people like, you need to always be out listed somewhere consistently, right? Because then all of a sudden you go dark for 6 months and then you come back up and they're like, it takes people a while to remember, who is this? You know, how do I do it? And you had to spend thousands to get on, displays and geofencing and retargeting and all that stuff to get people to remember you. So that's where we do find that.
Sorry, I was just thinking,
like, trying to remember
this is why I'm still active on Bumble, so that like if my marriage doesn't work out, I don't have to reactivate my account.
Yes.
I'll make sure Nicole hears that part.
Right?
I don't even know how to get on Bumble.
I don't know if that was a good analogy.
I was going to say, I've gone dark on that one. Even being single, I've gone dark on that for a long time.
Now we'll see if she listens to the podcast.
Yeah, just no one mentioned it.
Yeah, we always throw in a few tests every other.
Well, at least it's not like Tinder, because that's just rough.
So a question is on what to expect, and what I think is really important for marketers as we look ahead is how comfortable they are talking about the business cases, the trade-offs, the opportunity costs, the ROI of things, because more and more, and I think it's right, owners and operators are scrutinizing in a different way than Michelle said, where it's just like, we're not leasing fast enough, it's the marketer's problem. But I do think that they're starting to, not catch on per se, but they're learning more and more. And so they're asking, in many cases, more difficult questions of the marketer. And unless the marketer is just as vested or is catching on and up to the operations, then that puts them in a real bind. So I'm curious from your perspective, how much are marketers, at least the ones that you've worked with, and I know you more typically are probably working with owners and operators, but are really starting to understand, operations, so that they're not tongue-tied, when they're kind of trying to either defend their own existence or some of the things that they're suggesting owners invest in.
Well, and you nailed it, actually. A lot of them, the owners and operators now are saying, why do I need you? We're making money hand over fist right now in this last year, hand over fist. And we're like, why do we need to spend any money? We've got a 50-person wait list. What is your job? And as we've all seen, through the, not saying that we're all old, but like through the years, that there are ebbs and flows of our market, of our industry, and their seasonality. And, then all of a sudden you throw in COVID. This really kind of took us for a whirl here. But when you start looking at empowering, that's when I go back to, bettering your organization. So one of the things that we always recommend is that if you do have a current marketer, which a lot of them we still work with do, send them to training, give them the opportunity to go out and take on demos from stuff. Yes, I mean, don't get sold too quick, right? But do demos with other things, empower them to say, hey, how can we be better? How can we streamline things? But because what everyone's gotten stuck in is the same flow we've been doing for the last 50 years. As soon as I'm low on vacancy, go spend some money. That's what it is, right? Mm-hmm. And now it's like, if you can tell someone, how can we maintain our proactive approach? You know what? Why don't I send you to AIM or Optech or whatever? So that $1,000 you just spent for a ticket, which by the way, I am plugging that it's overpriced.
Agreed.
$1,000, yeah, it's actually like $1,400 or something like that now. Anyway, send them there, because that $1,400 just introduce them to, because that's the other thing too, is once we become an owner operator or we work with them, we see that they are so secluded from the industry, they don't know anything that's out there anymore. They're so hyper focused on themselves that they don't really look at all the new stuff. So if we can get people to broaden their horizons, if you will, I don't know if anyone can see my air quotes.
They can.
Okay, great. Oh God. Then we don't have to waste as much money on that reactive approach. And I think that's where we tell people, hey, we have relationships with all these different technology companies or other vendors. We can help you understand why this would work better for you. And we're agnostic, right? So we want to give you what's best for you. We're not going to recommend, I'll just say, sorry, more names. I'm not going to recommend Yardi for a 2-property, portfolio. Mm-hmm. It's huge, but they offer a Yardi Breeze, but that could be work, right? Or it's maybe just use the apartments.com, which I'll give them that plug. Apartments.com rental tool manager. You only have one property, use it. But when you have, someone that is a direct person working for you now, you need to get them involved with the operations to say, well, if you're telling me that we don't need to spend any more money, what's going on? Why are we not doing this? Your CRM will tell you the time frame that it took from lead to lease, right? It'll show you it took them 2 weeks to get in for a tour. It took them 3 weeks to convert to a lease, and then they're moving in. Typically, it's like 90 days. People start looking 60, 90 days. It took them 72 days to move in. Okay, so let's look at why that was so long. Was it that they're moving out of their current place? And then why are they on a wait list? What don't we have? You know, could you have said, hey, you're looking for a 2-bedroom, but I've got a 3-bedroom coming up. I can make it, I can make this work for you.
Yeah, totally.
What can I
Sorry, I could go we geek out on this.
No, this one somewhat tees up, David, because, having ran our organic department for the first few years here at Digible, one of the things we talk about with SEO is it a short-term or a long-term hold? And I'm going to connect this to this whole in-source, outsource with marketing, because I don't think we've touched on that. But, in the event that, it's a short hold and you're just looking to flip this thing essentially or sell it, we say a long-term SEO strategy doesn't make as much sense. So it's a different approach for us than if we know that you're going to have the property for 5 to 7 years. Does that have any impact, or would you think it would, on your decision to in-source or outsource using a consultant agency versus hiring full-time?
We do. That's a very good question. We have some folks that we work with now that are third party. And they say that, the developer wants nothing to do with it. He hires us solely to go in, do value add, clean it up, and let's go resell it. So they don't want to invest the time and the energy into someone that they have to train, right? They want to bring someone in that knows I'm going to use my first curse word, that knows their shit,
That's not a
one
curse
strike.
word here.
I was like, one strike.
You have to get to the F-bombs for it to really be.
Right. I was told not to give those. No. But they want someone that knows their shit. So when it comes to those third parties, they're the first to say, I need to outsource, because they don't want to waste their time learning all of this, because they know. I always kind of feel like sometimes they're the smarter ones, because it's like, I know that I'm going to call you for digital, you for training, you for value add, like here's a doggy park we're going to build up, but then it's like, and you, and they have their own board of advisors almost, right? And it's like, this is what we use. We go in, we clean up, and we get out, and you can get rid of it in 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, whatever it may take. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of that. We're like, we're not hiring any full-time people. They don't need to be here. We do, very different, but
totally. Yeah.
I'm just going to go back to proactive for a second and ask Michelle about this, but Anthony was mentioning how they obviously want to be proactive instead of reactive. You obviously and our team try to be proactive. How hard is that for you to convince the marketer and then have them help sell that through to the owner? And that'll maybe tee up Anthony, how hard it is to actually get them to be proactive.
Give a specific example. Yeah, David, are you talking about their budgeting strategy or?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's the easiest one, right? It's looks like you have 30 things about to turn out next month.
Yeah. So being proactive in this industry can be a little tough just because things change constantly, but then some clients have budgets set on a monthly basis and they can't get an increase. So then we're working within that. But if we know that, we can be proactive and ask for exposure, anything like that, and make the shifts 60, 90 days out. So it's easier with a marketer because then we can set up APIs, integration, so we have all of their data if they have a CRM, or we can work with them to say, okay, we know exactly when you guys do have that exposure. We know when seasonality hits and you guys need to be at 95 by October 1st. And here's exactly what we're going to need from it. Selling it up from what we provide the marketer to the exec team they work with, we've learned it's just about providing the data, so we can be proactive about it if we give all the information. So we can say, okay, you want to hit this occupancy goal by this date. Here's the market you're in. Here's the leasing velocity in that market. Here's the type of vacant units you have and the NOI tied to them. So we're going to put more budget to this campaign because you have a crap ton of 3 bedrooms coming available. And you make X amount on 3 bedrooms, but we're going to ask for 2,000 more to put into search, so we could do that. So just providing that level of detail months in advance, because we do know it can take a while for that to get approved, and then for us to get it in campaigns and make the optimizations, that also takes some time. So just getting the data from them, talking through it with the marketer, making sure you're on the same page. What are the KPIs? What are the exact occupancy goals you're trying to hit? Understanding the market, pulling all the data we have, and then giving it to them in a few different formats so they have everything they need, but then they can also pick and choose what they want to present, because sometimes we provide a lot of information that they're like, the owner's not going to care about this. Like, I just need to be able to pick and choose the data points, the money, and then sell it back, and a lot of lease attribution and things like that, because then they can say, hey, here's what we've done in the past when we've had budget increases like this. And then we just provide them with all that information. And I think that helps a lot. So when you don't have someone there that can then sell that through, that's where it gets tough.
So would you say it's 50-50 of a shot? Like if you're providing that someone's going to buy into it?
Honestly, I would say usually if they are in a tough pickle and they need those high occupancy increases with the data provided, it's usually like 75.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they are
with
receptive.
Michelle, I was going to guess 90%.
Well, if we're talking about my client, I'm just kidding. I would say, yeah, I think when we provide the data, and because they know they have an issue and they would rather spend more in marketing than lower rents or give out concessions. So they're going to start with us first, and they're going to see, is what you're doing working in that first month? If it's not working, then they'll get upset and they'll be like, well, why do we increase that? And it's not working. Most of the time, because of all the data we pull, it will work though.
And so the way you think it happens right now is you'll provide sort of this page long of data and bullet points. And then it sounds like you think the marketer is then picking and choosing which of the things they're pulling out of that, knowing what the owner or exec team cares about, and using that to push it through.
Yep. Yeah. They'll usually just send it off. It depends, again, their structure, whether they send it to the regional, whether they go directly to their VP of marketing, or whether they go to the owner if it's owned and operated, or if it's third party. I mean, it just kind of depends. But I think that's why we have to provide as much data, because of the different ways that all this communication and approval process goes, depending on who they work with.
My question for both of you is, where are marketers / I guess the properties as a whole the least proactive? Another way to put it would be most reactive. So is it in budgeting? Is it in like creative? Is it in, the analytics, like the analysis? There's a lot of different things we could go through, but if there were one or two things you guys would say are, the least proactive, in your experience, what would those buckets be?
So if we look at, it's a great question. I got this the other day from a client, and they were like, well, and I had to answer it like very quickly. So I'm going to hope that this works also today.
So you're failing today.
Failing miserably. But stalling. No, but if you look at the top 50, okay, what do they have that is the same across all of them? Brand management. The one thing that people don't understand is that when you have a portfolio and you have, so many various types of messaging and tone all over the place, people don't understand what they're looking at. And so they're like, you know what, maybe today I'm going to make a flyer because I've hired, my mom's sister's daughter who's a graphic designer, and she's going to make me a flyer, and it's going to be resident referral, and it's going to have some, little girl running through the park with a dog. Well, no, and it's like using sans serif over here and veranda over here, like all these weird fonts. What you see is that people don't spend enough money on getting a brand deck and sticking to that brand deck, and everything that they do, say and see, right? Say and see is all consistent, because then you actually create a brand that has longevity. So it's like, I know that Michelle, you live at a Greystar property. You know that everything they do has the same fonts, similar colors, same style, if you will, right? And you guys are like the ones that are better with this than me. But that's where I don't think enough money is spent to maintain that. And a lot of folks then, like, once you have that, it's very simple to run a campaign. Here's my brand deck. I just need to do a quick resident referral. Save me, everything's here for you. And now let's all look uniform. And then people appreciate that because there's a trust to it afterwards, right? So like what you said, that smell, you'll never forget that smell.
That's interesting. I want to hear Michelle's response to that. But it just, for me and David, we talk a lot on this podcast about, building this company and the framework that we've, put in place. But we never said specifically what we, like, in hindsight, if we would have changed the cadence of the framework that we built. So whether that's around salaries, compensation, whether it's about promotions, whether it's about, the evolve, like, org structure, or marketing, because you mentioned it's taken us 5 years to finally convince ourselves that we should go ahead and make that hire. And I remember in one of the books, who knows which ones it was, but it said one of the biggest mistakes that startups make is they don't put any effort or money into marketing until years later.
I also think Nancy told us that.
Yeah, I mean, I know plenty of
I think
people
it's in
have
every
said it.
book.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's not in just one, but so I think it's interesting that Anthony's saying it's that brand development and management that people overlook or wait too long on, because it makes a lot of sense to me. It's like, isn't that really the foundation, that you should be building everything else around when it comes to marketing? So, Michelle.
I was going to say, thank God we actually got the Digible logo redesigned within the first year.
Don't you have a flag of the old one in the office that was you guys, Nicole and Adam?
Yeah, David always calls it the
font.
pirate flag.
Yeah.
And as we talk font types, Anthony, I think it was Andromeda.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But man, did you imagine? Because it wasn't until we were building the Fiona one that we're like, okay, we got to actually get the Digible, actual logo at least done.
Thank God we met
Anthony,
no, not Anthony.
Andy.
Yeah, when we did, he kind of saved us from ourselves.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
I think that's a really good point, because if you're going to spend a lot of money on coming up with a scent, these properties are nice properties, and especially when you're talking one that the Greystar one I live in, if you're going to spend so much money on managing this property, hiring great people, making sure it's safe, making sure that you're doing all these little things, don't you want people to know about it? Don't you want the brand to be there? Don't you want the brand to get out that this is a great property? Because as David was saying, in Denver, there's a lot of competition. So you were saying that you feel like you could buy a property now and not really have to worry about marketing, so it'll just fill up. I would argue you should spend more on marketing, because right now, when my lease was up early July, there was hundreds of properties that were literally the exact same, almost that offered the same amenities, same square footage, similar pricing. So the possibilities were endless. It came down to location. But I could move into any of them really. And just they were all
a great thread potentially for us to go down to. I'm going to let David have a thought there, but then if we can, I'd love to hear from, again, both of you guys, but Anthony in particular, as many properties confront what Michelle just mentioned, how do you differentiate yourself? So how do you talk them through that? And I think David and I both might come back to Prometheus, in the way that it was the first time you and I had heard that approach. And that's just a cliffhanger, but I thought it was really smart in the way that they were trying to distinguish their communities versus maybe the approach we see most of the time for marketers.
Well,
but, yeah, go ahead.
I do agree, although Michelle made an important point, location is what mattered to her. So then Michelle, it's how much would how kick-ass would the brand have had to be for you not to choose that location?
Well, it depends how far out, because where I live, there's it's all apartment communities near me. So it depends how far out of the location I want to be in for the brand. And then for me, it would have to be the little things that I mentioned versus the brand. It would have to be at the actual property.
It's the client experience.
Yeah, for sure. Because again, we think about all this stuff from an operator marketing standpoint, but this is people's homes. This is where they go when they're done working. They don't, it's such a more personal thing to them, and it matters so much more versus the way that we talk about it and think about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And brand definitely impacts client experience.
Right.
And I'll just say, when Anthony's saying review, look at new vendors and software. And when the vendor has just a trash brand, I'm reading that, we're talking about this yesterday. It's is your AI any good? ?
Right.
But then it's almost, if the brand is trash, shouldn't I trust the AI more? Because they're focused on the machine. So, but it's hard because the credibility, if I see that you have actually spent on marketing, I believe okay, you've actually invested in other things too. It's more because I'm now trusting it's not vaporware, basically behind the scenes, right?
Well, and there's one more note on that. We were talking about this yesterday too. I have big brand loyalty, but I also, if I have one negative experience, I will not.
You're dead to me.
Yeah, 100%. It's either you've great customer service, I'm all in, or I've one terrible experience, I'm out.
Hence why reviews are so important for people.
Exactly.
I'm you guys, clean this up.
But there was when I was looking to see if maybe I wanted to move, I ended up re-signing, but I was looking on apartments.com and I found a property that had great rates. So I called them and they were like, that is not at all what our rates actually are. And I was like, well then, and it was a significant difference, $500 more a month. And I was like, well, why is your apartments.com listing say that I'm looking at it right now? And it's because they don't have the syndication, so it's not up to date. And I was like, well, this is terrible. And then I just got mad and I was like, I'm never going to live here. But going back to your original question, I think one thing that a lot of marketers are always reactive about is fire drills with occupancy. Even though there's so much data and they have access to so much data and they see the exposure, most of our clients are just dealing with so much at all times. They don't realize the property's on fire until they get a call or an email from their exec team or ownership saying, why are we dropping to 83%? And then they're like, shit, why are we dropping to 83%? And then it's this entire fire drill. Every vendor gets an email asking why, and it turns into this big thing. And it's always a reactive situation. I mean, we get them every single day, and we are analyzing data every single day. So even though there's so many things with budgets you can be proactive about and occupancies, that does seem to be the one trigger all the time.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, you can do Reed's question about brand differentiation. How would you advise?
Yeah.
Oh man, I almost forgot that question. I was like so into this one. I was like, okay, I gotta go back. With that's a very good question. So like, for example, and I'll use Greystar as an example also, because, they have so many types of properties, but each one of them has their own individual flair. I'm going to just use flair, right? Or let's go with identity. It's a better word. It's a bigger word. With
personality.
See, man, upping me up here. Everyone has their personality, but what they all share is exactly what Michelle is talking about. You can tell the minute you walk into a Greystar property that this is Greystar property by the way that the staff has been trained, right? You can tell. It's like going to Nordstrom's. Oh man, another plug. It's like going to Nordstrom's, right? Like everyone read that book, like
if
the
Greystar
Nordstrom
is
way.
not listening to this podcast, I'm going to make sure they do.
I know. I'm going to forward it to Nordstrom's.
Push this link out to COE.
But you go there, and that's where you do want to identify yourself based on like your location. So like when you see a lot of folks now, especially with new builds, right? You see them, they're like, hey, I'm in, like down in Florida, we've got something. It's in Brickell. Okay. Brickell is like, are you familiar with Brickell in Florida?
Mm-mm.
Oh man. Okay. Let me find something up here. What's the Rhino place you guys have now coming up?
Yeah.
It's like Rhino District.
Mm-hmm. It's just Rhino.
Oh, sorry.
Well, it's River Art North District, but you were saying it correctly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but like when you go to these certain areas that may be more artsier than others, right? Or you go to some areas that are like the DTC, Denver Technology Center. Okay. I'm learning all these things.
Digible wasn't allowed there. You can tell our office isn't there. So
really?
Right?
Oh,
no.
I was like,
thank
no way.
God. I would have been mad if you guys chose DTC. That's a drive.
Me too. Yeah.
That's where I'm staying.
Those
It's
halogen lights too. Like,
it's
suck the life out of it.
Absolutely
Whoever
not.
invented daylight white lights should be taken out because it's all about soft white.
Chinese water torture.
Yeah. No, but what they've done is about the personalities is what you see is that it's about that neighborhood, right? So that location. That's the way to differentiate on like your paint jobs. I'm not even kidding. It's literally like what your style is, what your artwork is, the way you have it. And then you look at the demographic and you say, hey, you know what? I have a commuting type demographic. So I need to know that we've got parking spaces. Is it paid or not? You know what I mean? And we have, tech is huge. So like Wi-Fi, huge. Like even with our new value add properties, like get better Wi-Fi, get better internet. Like this is a huge must for everyone because we're all working from home. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people are working from home now. But individualize yourself by your neighborhood is what we always like to say. But don't lose the company personality, right? Which is where I'm trying to get to. Sorry, I know it's like long-winded here. But like you'll always know it's a Greystar or an Equity or a Lincoln or a Morgan because you can see the way that they approach you and the way they talk, the way that they act. They have a system, and it's a tried and true system, obviously, right? And then all they do to differentiate is based on their location, what paint they have, and like the finishings. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'll pass this back to Michelle more as, a resident, but when you were looking at other options, did you feel like it was clear on the differentiators of those others, or did you have to kind of extrapolate that yourself? So the pricing's easy, right? Where it's like, this is $1,000 less or $500 less. And of course it turned out to be bullshit. But that's one of the things that I think apartments today struggle with is when you read their websites, those don't really come through because they will highlight the neighborhood. They'll talk location. They'll talk about the on-site experience, but they all blend together to me. It's like, this is the same rhetoric that I see on every single website. So they're still not really effective at clearly articulating those differentiators. And not that we're doing it right, but if you look at our website and when you go into our services, one of the most difficult things to do is differentiate your paid search. And so we really pushed ourselves, and I am, I'll say proud of where we landed in that. I feel like we very clearly and effectively, and we didn't do it through, some clever narrative. We just put the bullets out there. It's like, this is exactly what we do that is different than what you typically see from a paid search, provider. And I would appreciate personally, if I was looking at different apartment sites, if they were just more clear, instead of trying to, get really cute and clever, creative and eloquent with all that, it all feels the same. So I don't know if you agree with that.
I completely agree. It was very tough to understand the differences, especially Denver's a newer city. So most of the apartments I was looking at all were extremely similar they were a bit newer. So I knew the unit amenities were all similar. Again, most Denver properties have like in-unit washer dryer. It's not things you really have to worry about. And then amenities, the one thing that not all of them had was a pool, but most of them do have pools. Most of them have gyms that are open 24/7. They have lounges you can use with printers. Most of the downtown Denver properties had all that. Most of them had on-site parking. So for me, even scanning through the websites, they were all just so similar. And like through their ILS listings, they were very similar. So outside of location, the next thing I looked at was just pricing. They were all very similar in pricing as well. Maybe $100 more or less. And then square footage was similar. So all of it was very similar, which made it easy for me to decide to stay, but then also makes it harder to decide to stay. Because then it's like, is there something I'm missing out on that I didn't think of? So then the next thing I really looked at was reviews, because I think you can make yourself look great online. You can make the brand look great. You can list all these great amenities. You can throw up so many pictures of happy dogs and really get someone to be like, oh, this is a great property. But if I start reading reviews that say they don't answer your calls, maintenance takes forever, all this stuff, I will not live there. I would rather pay somewhere, because again, it's someone's home. I would rather pay somewhere that takes care of the property, that is quick with maintenance, that they're really kind to you. They help you figure out situations with your home. And with a review, if reviews say it's a bad property, I will follow those reviews. I will trust those people, especially if they're recent reviews and I can tell it's the management company that's currently managing it. Even if they reply, I no, that's probably a marketer, to be completely honest, just because I work.
Me.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, how can you become more proactive if that's really what it boils down to, which is where I was going to go to, is the reputation.
Yeah.
And you're going to trust, an actual resident more than hopefully you are, an ad or a website. And so, but that is still, as we got into that thread of reactive versus proactive, isn't that still a bit of a reactive strategy? It's like, we're going to try and generate reviews, and ultimately that's where a lot of people are going to go to decide whether or not, to give us a shot. And so how do you take, those reviews or that sentiment, especially if it's positive, and become more proactive in marketing it?
So generating those reviews in general, or marketing the positive reviews?
I think marketing the positive, marketing that, if you know, like one of our true differentiators is that our residents are genuinely happy.
Yeah.
Is that all you can do, is just like rely on somebody to eventually like search and look at your reviews on Google and that's what it is? Or is there a more proactive method of marketing, a really great resident experience?
Yeah, I think if you are in a saturated market and your product isn't that different from the one next door and pricing similar, et cetera, but you have a really great reputation, most of your residents are happy, I would involve them and I would do a marketing campaign around like resident testimonials. I would invest in a video campaign and ask, because happy residents will do that. I would do that for my apartment right now. If they asked me and said, hey, we're trying to do a campaign, do you mind giving a testimony? I would do it in a heartbeat.
Well, not that there was a wrong or right answer, but that was the right answer.
Oh, good.
Because I was hoping you might go even to TikTok, but it's like, isn't that what's starting to happen, is you're seeing more and more from residents in marketing campaigns, and that is kind of a new trend, and it is a way to create that differentiator because we're hearing directly from a resident.
Right. And I think it goes to, you're saying a lot of your clients know they need to be on organic social. I go still to like a Facebook page and an Instagram page for a property. And if they just post static images, I'm like, oh, do you not do resident events, or do you try and residents don't go? So I think building up your organic presence, and that includes Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, all of those things, and including resident images. So if you're throwing a pool party, take a lot of content and then throw that actual content everywhere. Stop wasting money on stock images and renderings. Get real pictures of your residents happy, because someone can clearly tell the difference between a stock image that you're using for marketing or a real resident event where you can tell a lot of residents are having a good time. So I would put a lot of money into content and then a huge organic push, video content, all that stuff, because you can use that forever and you can show it's not just the reviews, because maybe someone isn't reading the reviews, but they're going to get an ad or they're going to look at the organic page and see happy residents that are commenting and interacting. So you know it's real.
And that's where, so one of the things we also do when we're going in and doing a discovery phase is I ask everyone, when was the last time you did an actual resident survey? The one thing that we all know is no one ever wants to think that they have something wrong with their properties. No one ever wants to think that they can't do anything, that everything needs to be right. Like, oh, we're good. They just don't like it because the price is high. Hard no. It's because your maintenance is low. It's because your property, like there's, we always get the ones like, oh, there's a moldy bathroom. There's washer and dryers are always broken because, in the Northeast, we get a lot of community room ones, not individual. But have you listened to these things? Have you actually looked at what the issues are? Because one negative 1-star review is devastating. No one understands how devastating that can be because of what you just said. Mm-hmm. And so we say, when was the last time you did the survey? Can you make some of these? That's when operations and marketing cross over. Also, I think, is where let's do a survey. Let's read them all. Let's see what the headaches are and then the positives. And if you can, if it's not super capital improvements, hey, we would love an infinity pool on the top, we get those all the time. But making certain adjustments, because all it takes is that one resident to set a positive review and they know that you've got uniform type, again, gray star type of management. But then if it's the apartment itself, you don't know that until you're asking. So that's that proactive approach of always listening and stop being afraid of negative. Stop being afraid of that, because the only way you're going to grow. And, the other side of that is again, goes back to that human touch, right? So we don't realize, again, the retention, how much that actually saves you in heartache. It's the little things, when we always recommend on move-in gifts. They're well, what do you mean a move-in gift? I'm not wasting any money on move-in gifts. I just want their rent. And it's okay, let me ask you a question. When you go to a hotel, depending on which hotel chain you like, I'm not going to list all of them, but sometimes they send you a card. Hey, Anthony, welcome back. So glad you're here. Please let us know if we can help you with your stay. That little card that took her or him, about 10 seconds to write makes me go back with that chain every time. And all it was a card. So we say, hey, Michelle, welcome to your new home. Please let us know if there's anything we can do for you. It's just a card. It's not, a $75 bottle of Clicquot. No, which is great if you guys want to do it. But, it's along those lines. It's a little bit. That's where the human touch comes in. So if we can streamline our marketing efforts through AI and better the organization by figuring out how we can be better as a whole. And those are the little pieces that people don't think about that make a huge impact.
As he's saying this, sorry, Michelle, this hits me so hard now that we've read The Infinite Game. But I don't know if you're picking any of that up, but Simon Sinek would say, that's a very finite, meaning not to write the card. But if you're really about the resident experience and, whatever that purpose, which would probably sound similar, I would hope for a lot of owners, then you would take a very different approach and have a lot more success. So it's just such a classic example. And in this industry, maybe more than any other, when you think that not playing a finite game is extremely difficult, because it is a supply and demand, because of NOI, because of shareholders, especially with the REITs. But it's just super fascinating to me, all the applications after we've read this that I see just in day-to-day conversation now.
No, I think you're right.
I was going to touch on, I think, tying the tech back into marketers in a few years, or what is their job going to be if everything's automated. But it gives, if you have a really great process and system in place through AI and tech, that also makes the resident happy, because paying bills online, having just an easy system where I know I can make maintenance requests, I can pay my rent, I can see if I owe something, if I'm charged for something, I can see it all in one place very easily. I get an email when I've paid my rent, or if I need a reminder for anything, for parcel pending. So that's what we use for the lockers, for any deliveries I get. Things like that. So make my life so much easier living there. I can't imagine living at a property in today's world that does not have their shit together in a tech sense. But then also that gives the leasing team so much more time to be more personal, to set out those snacks, to blow up those balloons, whatever it may be, because they aren't doing that day-to-day stuff.
To focus on the actual leasing of the property as well too, right? So it's like, that's not, the leasing consultant should do that. But going to the tech one, sorry, and I know we're going over time here, but I always tell someone, if you're going to roll out a new product, you better be ready to use that product to its fullest extent, because you can't just throw on a chat bot on your website and be like, oh, it's cool, it does it itself, like I don't have to worry about it. No, you need to read everything and utilize it. Same thing with like all the apps that have for like maintenance requests. You have to train your people to use that, because that, now that you're offering something, you have to be able to be ready for it and handle it systematically and have the bandwidth to do it. So everyone's like, oh, this is tech, it's gonna be so much easier. Well, you didn't get trained on it, and you're not implementing it with all your team, and you told one property about it. And it's like, oh, no. You have to really, if you're going to do it, go all in and use it. So that's one thing with tech, like when you were saying about all the conveniences, we see it all the time, and things just like break. And then it's a huge thing. They're like, hey, they had this, parcel service, and now it doesn't work. Like, sorry, I'm going to throw another one, Fetch. You guys know Fetch, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So there's Fetch. Well, that's awesome, right? But like if you guys had your own version, like we have a lot of clients that want to do it themselves. They're like, hey, let's get an Amazon box over here, or let's do our own lockbox. Well, they got their first key fob, and they give everyone a key fob. It doesn't work. And then they don't have a maintenance thing to go do it. And then all these people are like, oh, I have a business I run. Like everything snowballs from there. So we just say like, do them testing, bullets and cannons. Jim Collins, another tag. We'll see you in Boulder this weekend. Things like that. So yeah.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up. Anthony, Michelle, thank you. You guys will have to be back on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the topic we didn't get into that we know Anthony could talk for probably 6 hours about is the ILS. So
I know.
think that's got to be.
Oh my gosh,
that's got to be our part 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. And the same thing, if Michelle, if I can add her, bring her in, because she sees it too.
Yeah.
I don't know how much value I can bring for ILS management, but I'm down to add commentary.
Perfect. Because you were like, it's always good to see, like, I always say, like, at a meeting that we're in, like, to throw an empty chair. And I always like, sometimes I put, like, don't tell anybody this, but I just went public with it. But like, put a little doll, like a Barbie doll in them, like, go pick up a Barbie doll from Target, put her in here and sit. This is the client. This is who we have to make sure is in the room making decisions with us. And that's when, like, what you said is why being back on the podcast, is you use apartments.com. Right. So like you will be the client perspective. So you know how difficult things can be on ILSs. And it's always good to see that perspective when we audit and everything.
Yeah.
So
all right, guys. Anthony, how should people reach out if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah. Well, I don't have Bumble. But no, I've got my email. It's just Anthony at the Brynson Group. So, and that's Brynson with a Y, BRYNSON, and then obviously our website. So thebrynsongroup.com. Just fill out the contact form.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you guys very much. It's been great.
Yeah. Thanks.